All right, Mike. So we're here today to talk about the CXO Corner, and in the spring 2020 issue of the new Insight Tech Journal, our CXO Corner featured Doreen Weitz, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer at Blue Yonder. Now, Blue Yonder is a client of Insight, but more than that, Doreen has become a friend of yours. Can you tell us how you met and what that connection means today?
Yeah, Doreen has been CIO for several years, and Insight and Blue Yonder have had a relationship for probably 4 or 5 years. And in fact, I met Doreen first at their headquarters. We were doing a tour with the CEO of Blue Yonder of their new offices, and Doreen was in the hallway. We just did a brief introduction. And then later, the sales team asked me to follow up with Doreen to become the executive sponsor for our relationship with Blue Yonder as a client. So I did that, and we started having monthly one-on-ones, just a typical executive sponsor relationship. But we've gotten to know each other, and we kind of joke that we start every one of our monthly meetings with 10 minutes of banter about what's going on with the kids and the family and Little League, and in her case, Little League. My kids are older than that now. But so, it's been a great relationship and a great partnership between Blue Yonder and Insight.
That's so great. Now, in her interview, Doreen details all the actions that needed to take place in order for Blue Yonder to transition to a SaaS model. That's really primarily what she talked about, and there's a lot that needs to happen. Now, as she relays what the company achieved, it seems like two elements were really critical to their success. The first being effective organizational change management, or OCM. And then the second, she talked a lot about the importance of their partner or vendor relationships. Now, you've worked closely with a lot of clients on very similar transformations. Is this a pattern that you see across the board for organizations?
Absolutely. And it was interesting when you think about Blue Yonder is actually a software company. That's what they do, for a business, for a living. And the product side of their business, they develop supply chain optimization software for their clients, particularly with a pretty heavy focus on retail. And over the past few years, they've aggressively moved their own solutions that they sell to their customers from an on-prem to a SaaS model. And in parallel, Doreen has been migrating their traditional corporate IT systems, many of those either from a private data center to the cloud or from a traditional premise-based software offering to a SaaS offering hosted by one of their partners. So a similar journey that we see a lot of other clients going on. And I think what Doreen was alluding to from a change management perspective was that there's as much of a cultural change when you think about how you do product development for a company like Blue Yonder, or as well as how IT operates for a company like Blue Yonder when you shift to a cloud SaaS model. It's not just a different location for an application or a piece of software to run. I mean, that's a part of it. But the way you use the application as an end user, the way you do development, continuous integration and continuous deployment, the way you leverage DevOps, the whole kind of end-to-end process from a development to a support to an end user actually changes pretty significantly. So that's what, I think led Doreen to highlight the importance of having organizational change management to help their organization, again, whether they're a user or product developer or in the IT organization, to shift to this new model. And we've been a partner, and we've helped with some of that by providing some of the organizational change management services and planning and done some of that work with them.
So it sounds like she was really aware of the importance of organizational change management from the start. Was there anything else that you really admire about the way that Doreen or Blue Yonder as a company handled their transition and transformation to a SaaS model?
Yeah, I think the thing that Blue Yonder did particularly well is they looked at it from an external perspective looking inward from a user perspective. So again, they're a software company, so that user could be their client. So they looked at it for their core products and said, let's adopt a client perspective and understand what they need out of our solution. And Doreen actually came out of her original background before she got into IT was as an executive in finance. So she was in effect a customer of the internal IT organization for a long time before she took the role of leading the IT organization. So she brings a lens that's looking at this from what does an end user need and expect out of the IT organization. So I think when I think about what Blue Yonder did particularly well is that, for their core products, they looked at it from a customer perspective. For their internal applications, they looked at it from an end user perspective and then kind of drove backwards, if you will, from there.
Makes sense. So we're in strange times right now. Let's talk about adapting to change. Doreen has this great quote that I love from her interview, and she says, "Becoming effective leaders in our rapidly changing environment starts with ourselves. First and foremost, we must be resilient, adaptive, and have a passion for change. We must become change agents." Do you agree with that?
I agreed with it when Doreen said it. Probably, I think that was in December of last year, January of this year. The tech world is always changing very quickly, and I've always believed that leaders have to continuously learn and adapt to be effective at what they do, and it's part of what I admire about Doreen. Fast forward 3 months. I don't think any of us have lived through a period of more drastic and rapid change than the COVID pandemic has unleashed, right? We've seen some industries hit incredibly hard, in fact, decimated and nearly shut down if you think about hospitality or cruise lines. We've seen other industries that are actually, overwhelmed with work, like our healthcare systems, et cetera. And then we've seen companies shift very, very quickly to remote work and enabling their workforce to work remotely. So it's never been more important than today to adapt quickly to an incredibly rapidly changing environment.
Yeah. And you mentioned that Doreen and you talk regularly, kind of have that banter in the beginning, but I imagine you spent a lot of time really, addressing the changes that companies are having to deal with today. How important is something like the CXO Corner or any other opportunities for people in the C-suite to connect and kind of share almost, not war stories, but, how you're handling change and how is that interaction, impacting or informing the decisions that you make today?
I think it's a huge opportunity for CXO level executives to, number one, hear what's happening in other companies and understand that they're not the only one going through whatever the current change or challenge they're embracing, and seeing some ideas of how other companies approach this. It can help them, I think, formulate their own plan so that they can successfully drive this change forward. And then I think the second reason it's really important, and hopefully people are taking advantage of this, is I'm hoping that some of the CXO folks who read that and were particularly interested in what Doreen had to say, for example, reached out to her and via LinkedIn and said, hey, could we connect? I'd love to share some ideas. I'd love to, build my network, and we can, share ideas and be thought partners for each other as we're going through this. So I think, when you think how important digital and social is as a means of connecting from a business perspective today, CXO Corner provides a great vehicle for executives to do that.
Mike, thanks again so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you, Julian. Happy to help anytime.